Very much. Just want to broaden out the conversation. And David Sirota, our syndicated columnist, and Ben Ferguson, CNN political commentator. And guys, to both of you, we have talked about Edward Snowden multiple times on this show. David Sirota, you were the first person that popped into my brain when I heard Fourth Amendment, because this is what you have been, saying over and over and over. So do you feel a little relieved with this ruling?
Absolutely. I mean, this proves that Edward Snowden is a whistleblower. He is a whistleblower who blew the whistle on serious crimes. I mean, before this ruling, we knew this. The Washington Post reported that the NSA has been violating rules and laws about privacy thousands of times a year. Now we've got a court ruling about the constitutionality. And my question for the entire political system right now is, if Edward Snowden is going to be prosecuted as a criminal, despite the fact that he's exposed these crimes, why aren't James Clapper, the head of the Office of National Intelligence, and Keith Alexander of the NSA, why aren't they being prosecuted for their crimes in the face of the Fourth Amendment, their crimes against the Fourth Amendment, their crimes lying to Congress about this?
I know you've made that point before. We've talked about the Clapper exchange. Ben Ferguson, though, I know you disagree. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, here's the problem. Edward Snowden may have actually given some information that we already knew about, but he still stole it to obtain it, and he broke the law to get it. And the other issue is he's not a hero, he's not a saint, because a lot of the information that he did take had nothing to do with this data mining subject at all, and he took it because he could, and then he shopped it around the world to our biggest enemies and has asylum in Russia. So to imply that this was just one single piece of information that Snowden took from the American government is naive at best, or just flat out trying to mislead the American people, because he is a person that broke the law and stole far more than this information, which, by the way, we already knew and was already reported on and very well could have been challenged in court. So he is no hero.
This is the perfect jumping off point, because I'm sure you all saw the 60 Minutes report, and in case the viewer has not, let me just play this, because this is how this top NSA official is now describing the scope of what Ed Snowden stole. So it was 60 Minutes last night, and this official says that he is open to any deal that would get those secret documents back, and that actually includes an offer of amnesty to Snowden. Roll it.
He's already said, if I got amnesty, I would come back. Given the potential damage to national security, what would your thought on making a deal be?
So my personal view is, yes, it's worth having a conversation about. I would need assurances that the remainder of the data could be secured, and my bar for those assurances would be very high. It would be more than just an assertion on his part.
Is that a unanimous feeling?
It's not unanimous.
Not unanimous. Let me move on just to spell this out. So this would mean a free pass back to the U.S. from Russia, where he's currently sitting there. He's under this temporary asylum, and those espionage charges he is facing, here in the U.S., maybe dropped. Let's be clear, though, that the White House specifically today, because we reached out, they're shooting down any talk of amnesty for this man here in the United States. But David Sirota, you say bring him back. Why?
Well, I say that he certainly deserves amnesty, except that I also would say this. If the NSA is making such an offer, it means the NSA is very frightened about what other information Edward Snowden has that may embarrass the NSA or actually show that the NSA has been conducting even more criminal acts against the American people than we even know about. I think that what we need is a congressional inquiry, a congressional hearing that really brings out all of this stuff so that we know what the scope of what the NSA is actually doing in full.
So there's a bigger concern there as far as what else could be out, whether it's whistleblowing or leaking, depending on your perspective. Ben?
It could be an issue, though, that you have people in the NSA that are wanting to save their own legacy and their own rear ends by making sure that more embarrassing information doesn't come out. And it's not really an issue that much of national security. But I go back to the core here. If you bring Snowden back and you give him amnesty, you're basically saying to anyone that works in the government that at any point you're not happy with either your boss, the president, your chain of command, that if you're willing to steal information and go out in the world and it's big enough and good enough, we'll let you give it out to the world and we'll invite you back home afterwards. You can't do that the same way that America has a policy that we don't negotiate with terrorists for American citizens, because if you do it once, it will never stop.
It's
and
a great point. It's a great point of setting some sort of precedent. David, how would you respond to that?
But here's the thing.
The notion of if it's okay for one person, then it's okay for others. Go ahead.
There should be a precedent that says that when government higher-ups are committing crimes, that whistleblowers should be able to blow the whistle in a way that exposes the crimes that they've committed. That's the precedent that would be set here. That's the precedent that needs to be set. We have an administration, the Obama administration, that is waging a war on whistleblowers right now, making it impossible for them to expose the crimes that are happening within the government, crimes against the American people. I think we should feel more comfortable with a precedent that's set that says whistleblowers who expose systemic crimes against the population, systemic crimes against the Fourth Amendment, deserve to be treated as heroes, not as criminals.
But you're admitting a major fact, which is Snowden took things that were far outside the scope of what you're choosing to talk about right now.
You're
that
assuming
is not
that.
a whistleblower.
You're assuming
it's
that.
a
Where is
traitor.
your proof for that?
That is
you have
a
no
traitor.
proof for that.
When you look,
you are simply assuming.
when you look
that.
at, hold on, think about this for a second. If you're going to
go ahead, Ben, make your point. Make your point.
What we know that he is taking is information that has exposed crimes.
Hang on. Both of you. Time out. Ben Ferguson, make your point. David Sirota, respond. Go.
There are millions of pieces of data, is what we've been told that he has. He's even claimed that. All of it cannot be connected to one single core issue. And that's exactly why the Russians and other people offered help, because they had information they wanted that he had that was outside the scope of what he did in his narcissistic interview when he wanted to become famous with that reporter months ago. Otherwise, they wouldn't have taken the political risk of housing him in Russia if they already knew everything that he had, because he gave it up in a report. That's beyond whistleblowing. That's called committing a crime against your country.
Facing espionage charges, David.
My response to that is that I find it interesting that a conservative, an alleged conservative, would berate a whistleblower for blowing the whistle on crimes against the Fourth Amendment, which conservatives hold up supposedly as so sacred to them. Edward Snowden was not in Russia because the United States government would not offer him a safe passage back to his country with Amnesty, or a safe passage to another country. So blaming him for being in Russia is positively absurd. My simple point is this: the information that Edward Snowden has disclosed has exposed major and systemic crimes against the United States government, and conservatives like Ben and anybody else who berates him are taking the side of criminals and taking the side of violating the Fourth Amendment, as we just heard a court just ruled.
True heroes, let me end with this. True heroes don't have to go to America's biggest enemies to find a place to live if they're such great heroes as you're describing now. That's called being a
true
fraud
heroes
and
get
a
the
traitor
protection of a
and working
country that
against
says
America.
thank you for blowing the whistle on crimes. A hero in a country that's patriotic is a country that says thank you for blowing the whistle on crimes against the Constitution. And it's amazing that a conservative, or somebody who calls himself a conservative, would...
Guys, let me take the heroes out of it. Let's just practically speaking, I'm just curious, just for fun.
Sure.
David, first to you. If Edward Snowden were to come back to the United States and then that asylum would be granted, what would he do, job-wise?
Well, I don't know what he would do. I mean, that's a good question. I don't know what kind of deal he would cut. Well, look, I think that he certainly offered up enough information to convict a whole lot of people in the United States government, potentially, and to potentially reform the NSA. I mean, even President Obama, who's been embarrassed by these disclosures, has said that these disclosures have resulted in exposing a lot of systemic wrongdoing.
What would he do? But he is also a hated man. Does he hide?
Well, sure. I don't know what he would do. I mean, nobody. You should ask him that.
I'd love to. Ed Snowden. Love to ask him that. Ben, what do you think?
I think if he came back to America, which is probably not going to happen, he'd probably hang out with a lot of guys like the one you just heard from, and they'd sit around talking about how great they are and some patriots, even though they're in favor of breaking the law. I mean, this guy's about as employable as George Zimmerman is right now in this country. It's going to be a bad day.
Keep billing yourself as a conservative and taking the side of people who violate the Fourth Amendment. A conservative is not somebody who takes the side of violating the Fourth Amendment.
Your definition of conservatism and mine are very different. If you say that being a conservative is advocating for lawbreakers, then I'm not your type of conservative, because I actually believe in the laws of the land in this country.
You're on the side of people who want to violate the Constitution. You're literally taking the side of people who have violated the Constitution. You are proudly taking the side of people who have violated the Constitution. And conservatives, at least the ones that I know, are not for that.
All right, gentlemen, leaving it there. I should have brought my whistle today. I always appreciate both of you. I love hearing both sides. The passion in your voices. Appreciate both of you. David Sirota, Ben Ferguson, thank you very much. We should mention